I want to talk about the link between breathwork and shamanism. And I understand that there are cultural appropriation concerns that are linked to the use of the word shamanism. Unfortunately, in the West and in most cultures I'm aware of, we do not have a frame of reference that properly allows us to talk about some of the things that happen during breathwork experiences. And because that frame doesn't exist, it's hard to put those experiences in a context that makes sense within our own cultural context. And so in this case, it's very hard not to turn to shamanism because some of the experiences seem to be so closely related to what is described in terms of those practices. What I mean by that is that shamanism is the use of an altered state of consciousness in order to contact spirits to get them to help with tasks in the real world, in our reality. And through breathwork, because we alter the body's chemistry, some of the experiences that can happen during breathwork seem closely related to what is described as shamanic trance in different cultures. And because shamanic trance is not something that has a frame of reference in our culture, we have to use those terms in order to try to start understanding what we're talking about. And I can talk about my own experiences here to try to illustrate some of the things that have happened to me during breathwork experiences, or let's call them visions that I've had during breathwork experiences, where I didn't have a frame of reference in order for those experiences to make sense. My first breathwork experience actually was very much, to me, what seemed like a shamanic trance. During the experience, I was breathing and I was getting a sense of tetany, so I had tingling in my arms and in my face, and it felt like as if my fingers were sort of seizing up a little bit and were becoming sort of fused together, and there was tension in my hands. And when I looked down at myself, at my body, and I looked down at my hands, my whole body was covered with scales. I was covered in red scales. And as I realized that I was covered in those dragon scales, I turned into a dragon. And the vision that I had was of flying in the sky high above a mountain range. And I had a clear message come to me telling me, you must serve. And so that was one of my experiences. It was my first one, actually. I've also used breathwork to do something related to soul retrieval. And so soul retrieval is when you send parts of yourself away, mostly in childhood, but it can happen at any point in life, where there's parts of you that you renounce, in a sense, because they were discouraged, or they were told that they were wrong, and you were told that those things, those behaviors, or those parts of you were not okay to be, and so you sent them away. And from the perspective of the shamanic, you send them away in non-ordinary reality, and you can retrieve them when they're ready to come home and you're ready for those parts to reintegrate. And so during breathwork, I went to meet parts of me that were ready to come back. And in that experience, I met the child in me that likes to make noise. And I'd never really let that part out. To give you an idea of how that part wasn't integrated in me, I tried to start playing harmonica at some point in my life, and I had the dog Amy at the time, and I would not play harmonica in the house because Amy was scared of the harmonica, and I felt like I was disturbing her, and so I never really got into playing it because I was scared I was going to disturb my dog. And so that's a part of the story where I got to call this part home, and in doing so, in the process, got to sort of heal that part of me. And now I'm playing flute, and I'm showing up in the world and trying to feed that part of me that wants to make noise, that wants to be seen. And even these YouTube videos are sort of a way for that to manifest itself. And so that experience was really meeting that child and making noise and playing drums with it. So that was one experience. In another breathwork experience, I went back to explore a dream that I had. And the dream was very vivid to me. It was a very specific dream, and it felt like none of my other dreams. My dreams are usually not very vivid, and they usually don't come with a message. And this one seemed particularly important, where I met essentially in that dream my inner shaman, and he was teaching me a lesson, and I wasn't quite sure what the lesson was. And so I took down that dream and I journaled it. And so I had all the details written down. And I went to revisit that dream as part of my inner journey during introspective breathwork. And in visiting that dream, I found new meaning. By doing it through breathwork, new insights came, and I understood what that dream meant. And in my life, the raven was always an animal that was very present. There are ravens around my house. This is the place I grew up in, and I have a raven tattooed on my right shoulder. It's always been an animal that's been very present in my life, and very much an animal that I associated with. And in that breathwork session, revisiting the dream, without going into all of the details, I essentially understood that my relationship with the raven as a spirit animal was coming to an end, and that I needed to start the process of letting go and of honoring that bond that I shared with that animal essentially all of my life until this point, because it was time for that relationship to end. And this happened in November this year. I built an altar to honor a raven next to my bed after that event. And when I went to Iceland for ISTA level 2, during a breathwork session, as I was leaving the session and I was leaving the breathwork, what happened is that raven came to visit me and told me that it was time for that bond to be severed. And so in Iceland, raven came to say goodbye, and that is how that relationship to that spirit animal ended. And it was beautiful, and I cried every tear in my body at the time. It was really difficult. But this is a perspective. I'm sharing this because it's definitely part of my breathwork journey. I see breathwork as very tied to the shamanic, and I think it's important to talk about the aspects of breathwork that are sometimes not as mind-driven and understandable from our Western perspective, because we don't have a frame of reference for them. And so as you maybe take your own journey into breathwork, this is something that you have to keep in mind because it might show up for you. And if it does show up, then I encourage you to go look into some of those traditions to try and get a better understanding. And if you have questions, you can always send me an email or comment on this video. I'll be happy to talk about it.